humans, we are naturally an odd civilization of mammals. Don't you agree? I mean, think about it. From the moment we're born, the clock starts ticking. The clock that eventually takes us back to, I don't know, where it all started, I guess. We spend the majority of our 70, 80, maybe even 100 years, if we're lucky, usually stuck in our own minds, struggling with demons of our past and looking for ways to find some kind of peace, some kind of pleasure in life. The one thing that seems to separate us from the apes is, I guess, the ability to contemplate. I think, therefore I am. But in our ability to control our lives and be more enlightened, we as people develop this ability, usually through years of being swindled or lied to or tricked. We develop a skeptic approach, usually to everything and everyone. But we must be careful, right? Or we can miss out on the very real mystical world that surrounds us, the seen and the unseen. When dealing with the paranormal topic, we do have our fair share of con artists. I'm not saying we don't. And the theatrical performers that lie and deceive for profit and notoriety, and usually a TV show and some kind of financial gain. But at the end of the day, it's us, you and I, that are the key to the unseen world. We're the ones that sense it. We can see it at times. It's an amazing place that ties and binds us together at the deepest root of the human experience. What does it take for a person to believe in the fantastical, the amazing, the paranormal? For instance, most recently with UAPs, or better known as the UFOs, hundreds of eyewitness accounts for years, educatedly high-trained, scientifically based experiencers have went before Congress, speaking loud and clear for all to hear that we are not alone. Most recently, the highly decorated U.S. Air Force officer and intelligence official David Grush for the Air Force, celebrated official. He was, in fact, the golden boy until one day when he turned whistleblower and told Congress the U.S. federal government, in collaboration with private aerospace companies, are and have been involved in recovery and reverse engineering of a non-human craft. And he also went on to say further, they do in fact possess the non-human pilots of those craft. After his testimony, it's funny though, he went from highly celebrated and decorated to a wacko with a great imagination. Oh, anyway, let's talk ghost, the supernatural happenings. How many credible people have came forward in the past, over the years, with stories of their own personal encounters, some providing audio and video with their testimony, knowing damn well they would be scrutinized and most certainly destroyed and shredded for presenting all the stories and all the evidence they had. So I ask you, how much is enough to make you believe? Let's test it, shall we? Tonight's case comes from my hometown of Indianapolis, Indiana. It was witnessed by 5 family members, 3 police officers, 2 clergymen, and was documented officially by the Indianapolis Police Department. It had its own little case number for the public records. So let's see what it takes for you to believe. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is your Shadow Nation.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
Stop this. A UFO.
From the official case files of the Indianapolis Police Department, on February 25th of 1990, Sergeant William Clark, a patrolman Stan Anderson, Both were dispatched to a report of a burglary in progress. Both units being close to the location at the 2800 North block of Lasalle Street in Indianapolis, Indiana, took the call and headed that way. With red lights and sirens a blaring, off they went. As they arrived, they parked their cruisers about 5 cars down from residents. As they approached the house, they said, they noticed an elderly black female running from the home with what appeared to be a lid to an ice bucket chasing her. The woman was so much shock, she couldn't even talk when the officers were asking her if she was all right. I know I'd have been in shock. The officers started to sneak around the back in order to catch the burglar when they heard a gentle female voice from the front door, the voice of Angela, the homeowner, asking them to come inside. As the officers entered the house, they immediately noticed the house was torn to shreds. In the report, it even stated that everything appeared to be broken. Everything. They noticed that the homeowner, Angela, and all 5 family members were seated at the dining room table, right in front of the officers. Both of them asked at this time, "Is this everyone in the house?" The homeowner, Angela, replied, "Yes, sir, it is." As the officer stood there in the front room staring at the family, in the dining room, all of a sudden, they heard a noise coming from the left side of the room, a shaking noise. Out of nowhere, a vase lifted off an end table, floated for a few minutes or two, then launched at great speed across the room, missing the officers' faces by inches, and finally crashing against the other wall in the front room with great force, leaving a huge dent in the drywall, they say in the report. Obviously stunned at this point, Officer Clark asked who threw that. At this time, Angela, the homeowner, asked the officers to please sit down so she could tell them what was happening. As Sergeant Clark sat with the family, though, Patrolman Stan Anderson continued to watch his back and keep an eye out for any suspects that might be in the house. The sergeant sat down to speak with the very soft-spoken Angela. At this moment, all the glasses they were drinking from immediately shattered at the exact same time on the table, spilling beverages all over the table and the floor and splattering all over the walls. The homeowner replied, "You see, officer, nobody threw that vase at you, just like nobody broke these glasses on the table." Still in a state of shock, Sergeant Clark and Officer Anderson stated, "I thought a burglary was happening." At this time, Angela admitted to the officers she had just told the 911 operator that if she had told the truth, nobody would come. She was afraid they would think it was a prank and nobody would ever show up to help. The homeowner, Angela, continued her story, visibly shaken and very upset. She pushed through the tears, but while she was pausing to catch her breath, Officer Anderson noticed a strange sound that could be heard coming from all over the house, it seemed like. It sounded far off, but yet right behind the officer's head, as he explained it. Both the sergeant and Patrolman Allen described the sounds as a low-pitched growl or hissing noises and what sounded like soft whispers of a distant conversation happening right above their heads. At this point, Angela and the homeowner had gathered herself together, at least enough to finish her story. Angela stated that for the last 2 weeks, small, strange occurrences had started happening all around the house. From bottles of perfume mysteriously ending up spilled all over the floor and other bottles and cups busted all throughout the house with no reason she could find. Lights would flicker and strange otherworldly voices would whisper from empty rooms throughout the house. But on this day, February 25th of 1990, all hell was about to break loose. Earlier that day, while Angela was at work, her brother Robert, who lives with her in the same house and suffers from cerebral palsy, called Angela at work stating she needed to come home right away. Something he couldn't see was tearing up the house, throwing cups and knickknacks all around him and crashing against the walls. Loud thumping noises could be heard coming from inside the walls from all around him. Angela, being caught up in her work on a very busy day, laughed it off and said, "Well, call the Ghostbusters and leave me alone. I'm busy." That's probably what most of us would say. Then she hung up the phone, and several minutes passed. That's when Angela received another phone call. This time, it was from another family member who told her, "Come home now. This isn't a joke. We need you to come home, Angela." Angela told work she had to go immediately for a family emergency. She left work and was heading home. As she arrived at the house and walked in the front door, the first thing she noticed was her brother Robert, with Angela's small child behind him. Robert was holding a baseball bat. Angela, of course, asked, "What are you doing?" And Robert replied, "I'm protecting your son from the monsters." Angela, not certain as to what was happening, found out that apparently Robert was babysitting that day, and he heard Angela's small son scream in horror from his bedroom. So Robert ran down the hallway to the little boy's room, and when he opened the door, almost immediately, the window exploded outward. So hard, parts of the window glass was stuck in the wood of the neighbor's siding. At least that's what the police report said. When Robert asked what had happened, the young boy screamed, "A monster grabbed me and wouldn't let me go." While the officers were sitting at the table listening to the story with all the family around the table began to float off the floor about a foot and a half. This lasted for 20 to 30 seconds and ended as it smashed back to the ground with a thud. At this time, the family members pulled out rosaries. Some even had bottles of holy water from the church, and they started sprinkling all around them. At this time, the iron lifted up from the ironing board, floated there for a few seconds, and went flying all the way through the house, smashing into the front room wall, which left a huge imprint in the drywall. By the time everyone realized what they had just witnessed, the iron lifted off the living room floor, once again flew through the house, and smashed into the cabinets, this time in the kitchen, once again breaking all the cabinets. As the officers went to investigate, the fridge door opened and the eggs exploded through an opening that looked like little holes, the officer described as, on the top of the eggs. Back in the dining room, a box of aluminum foil hit Angela in the head. Then the radio in another room flew from the counter in the hallway, sliding all the way into a bedroom and under the bed. As the officers went to look, they noticed it had a large hole in the center. It looked like a firework had exploded inside it. Officer Anderson finally asked Angela to speak with him in private in the front room. The officer asked her if anyone in the family had dealings with demonic things or any type of satanic worship. At this time, they heard a very low-pitched voice coming from an empty room, crying out, "No." Both officers confirmed no one, not any of the family members, were in the part of the house where the voice came from. As Officer Anderson went to investigate, he walked into the room from which the sound came, he said. "I felt a presence, like something was coming around my shoulders, and once I left the room, the sensation was gone." Officer Anderson shared what he had just felt with the family. And Angela's boyfriend at that time said earlier that day that he had felt the exact same sensation in that exact same room. It scared him so bad he started crying and reciting the 23rd Psalms. At this time, both officers reached out to the department chaplains and even their private ministers to see if any of them were available to come to the house immediately. Chaplain Cunningham and Pastor Gibson were first on the scene. They walked room to room reciting scripture, all the time witnessing and hearing strange voices and items being thrown throughout the house. The whole time the prayers were happening, things seemed to calm down at the time, and after sitting with the family for a while, Sergeant Clark promised to return the next day to check on things and the well being of the family. Upon Sergeant Clark's arrival the next day, Angela explained some more things did happen that night, but she had received a phone call from her sister that was most troubling, who was very upset as she lived in Puerto Rico. The sister told her she had seen a vision of a man walking down her hallway reciting the 23rd Psalms while crying. Angela's sister at this time asked how her son, Angela's nephew, Tony, who had been staying with Angela in Indianapolis, was doing and if he was around. Angela said he had been quiet and stayed in his room most of the day. Angela's sister replied, "Put Tony on a plane back to Puerto Rico immediately." Tony wouldn't speak with the police that day, but later on he did tell Angela's father he was a member of a group in Puerto Rico that sacrificed animals and did pray to Satan. Tony was sent back to his mother over the next couple days in Puerto Rico, and slowly but surely the activity stopped. On Wednesday, February 28th, 1990, at 1400 hours, Father John Ryan of St. Anthony's Church in Indianapolis came to the home on Lasalle Street and performed an exorcism. The two officers wondered how they would file this report. I mean, think about it. How would you and I report something like this? I mean, honestly, there's just no categories for it. Not for a police department. They were instructed to file this case as vandalism. And so that's how it was done. For Sergeant William Clark, this case reaffirmed his faith, as he stated, after witnessing demonic activity firsthand, there can be no doubt the Bible is true and God is real. Ending the report filed the 28th day of 1990 from the official Indianapolis Police Department case files, number 734841 F Frank A Alpha. Vandalism. So I ask you again, what does it take for you to believe in the paranormal? The clock is ticking. The search for truth continues daily. Most of these credible sources with these not as rare as you would think cases are usually buried in a dusty file cabinet labeled under classifications such as this one, a case of vandalism. A lot of you don't know this, but for 5 years, I served as a patrolman for the Indianapolis Police Department. I can still remember my psych test questions when I was going through the interview process. And wouldn't you know it, listed very close to the top of the page, the questions, do you believe in aliens or UFOs? And the other question, do you believe in ghosts? Kind of makes you wonder, huh? Why would those questions be included in a police psych exam? And how do you think you would answer them if you really wanted the job? Do you think they include these questions because the stigma we had been programmed to attach to such phenomena would reflect poorly on the department, or is there more to it? Do they understand these things exist? And they need to know when it comes time to classify these strange cases, such as Angela's and the Devil on LaSalle Street case. Will you be willing to label it as vandalism, just like these officers were instructed to do? I commend the courage of these two officers that refused to walk away from the family and the darkness and did everything they could to help each one of them. All we want in life is the truth, whether it be the mundane or truly life-changing and mystifying. All we want is the truth. And the clock keeps ticking. Thank you to all my viewers and listeners around the world for your love and support over the years. Please be sure to visit all the Shadow Nation podcast media sites so you don't miss any upcoming episodes or events. Be sure to check out the website, guys, shadownation.com, for this episode and over 16 years of archives. Also, be sure to like and share Shadow Nation Podcast Facebook page. And be sure to join our TikTok if you like our dead sessions at Shadow Nation Podcast. That's at Shadow Nation Podcast. And if you have a moment, please smash that subscribe button on the podcast YouTube page. That could be found at Shadow Nation Podcast. Pretty easy, guys. It really helps the show, gets more subscribers, and it gets the word out. From the haunted back roads of America, this has been another Shadow Nation episode. Don't go changing America. You know I won't. Because I love you. From the Shadow Nation studios, I'm your host, Sean Burris, saying keep watching the shadows. Because you never know what might be watching back. Good night, everybody.